All right. Well, looks like you chose Texas. Yeehaw! All right, welcome to Texas. I'm sorry for that. That's really embarrassing. But anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about the annexation of Texas. The story of Texas, we got to go back to the 1820s, 1830s. You see, Texas was once Spanish territory, as was Mexico. But then in 1821, Mexico declares independence from Spain, and it's now its own country, thus putting Texas in the hands of Mexico and in the hands of the Mexicans. And as our country continues to expand and spread west, a man by the name of Austin asks to set up a small colony in Texas, kind of right along in this area here. He asked the Mexican government for permission in 1827 to set up a colony in Texas. The Mexican government says, sure, we'd love to welcome you, but, and there's always a but, right? There's a couple of stipulations. First of all, you must choose only moral and hardworking settlers. Austin says, all right, I can do that. Secondly, when you get here, keep in mind, Spanish is our official language. All official documents will be in Spanish. You must honor them. Says, okay. Goes on to say, also, the official religion is Catholicism. You must honor, respect, convert to Catholicism. Say, okay, we can do that too. And you must respect our culture and no slavery. And once again, Austin says, yeah, great, no problem. We can do that. And so Austin chooses a total of 297 families. They refer to themselves as the old 300. And they begin to settle Texas. Everything goes great for a couple of years. But, and again, there's always a but. Shortly after that, news spreads that Texas is a great place to be. And in a course of about 3 years or so, tens of thousands of Americans, Texans, right, they start flooding into Texas. They start flooding into Texas, and tensions start to rise between these Texans, who are formerly Americans, and the Tejanos. Now, Tejanos are simply Texans of Mexican descent. So we can think of them as Mexicans, but they're Texans of Mexican descent, the Tejanos. And we start to see in the early 1830s tensions rising between the Tejanos and the Texans. You see this new group of Texans coming in. They don't respect the Mexican culture. They don't want to speak the Mexican language. They don't want the documents to be in Spanish, the Spanish language. And we start to see some real problems here. And so Moses Austin decides he's going to head down, talk to the Mexican government, and see if, hey, maybe we can work something out. Tensions continue to rise, and I'm really going to kind of condense this here. And ultimately what happens is the Texans call for a revolution. And they say, you know what, we no longer want to be a part of Mexico. We are breaking away. We want to form our own country. And war begins. One of the bloodiest battles of this, Texas Revolution is at the Battle of the Alamo, where the Mexican army led by General Santa Anna comes in and just absolutely wipes out the Texans at the Alamo, which was an old Spanish missionary. Very few survivors, just the women and children, and basically they let them live so that they can go and tell everyone else what happened at the Alamo. Well, this only serves to upset the Texans, and they fight back with vengeance, and this is where we get the cry, "Remember the Alamo!" And so we see ultimately what happens then is that the Texans are victorious, and Mexico is forced to surrender begrudgingly. They don't want to surrender, but they end up being forced to surrender. And in 1835, we see that Texas, after the Texas Revolution, becomes the Lone Star Republic. And for a period of 10 years, Texas is its own state, its own country rather, the Lone Star Republic from 1835 until 1845. Then in 1845, the United States Congress, they decide that they are going to annex Texas, which is basically kind of this wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You are now a part of the United States. When you annex a territory, you're basically saying, hey, come on in and join our country. Now, the Texans support this pretty overwhelmingly. They're like, yeah, this is great. The Americans, however, they're not so sure. Remember, this is all a part of that piece of manifest destiny, that belief that we are sped from sea to shining sea. This is 40 plus years after the Louisiana Purchase. A lot has changed in that time, and James K. Polk and the Americans, they're looking west and saying, yeah, Texas is going to become a part of our country. Now, there's some debate over the treaty to annex Texas. The northern senators are especially opposed to it. Why? Well, because Texas slavery has cropped up in Texas pretty substantially. There's growing of cotton, and if we add Texas to the Union, they will be added as a slave state, one, which kind of upsets that delicate balance between southern state senators, slave state senators, and northern senators, or free state senators. They've got this delicate balance, and that would upset that and upset representation in Congress. Plus, it would also ultimately lead to the spread of slavery. Many Americans in the North at the time, they view slavery as a fire, and they're just simply trying to control the fire. They're trying to control slavery and hope that it dies out, hope that the fire burns itself out. Adding Texas lets that fire spread to the west, and they do not want that fire to spread to the west because there's fear that the fire will continue to spread. And so that's kind of the metaphor. So there's this debate over annexing Texas. That's one part of the debate, slavery. The other part of the debate is that Mexico is still very upset over this whole Texas Revolution thing. And Mexico essentially says to the United States, if you annex Texas, you have now declared war on Mexico. And so we know, and the American senators know, that annexing Texas is going to lead to some problems. It's not going to just be, whoop, Texas comes in. Part of it, there was this boundary dispute. You know, Mexico views Texas's boundaries as this area, pretty much right here. Texas and the United States view Texas's boundaries all the way down to the Rio Grande and stretching up into here. And so we see that there are going to be some real issues if we annex Texas. However, we ultimately do decide to annex Texas. In 1845, Texas is added to the Union, one of the only states to ever be basically its own country prior to becoming a state. And that's more or less how Texas came to be. Again, to recap, it started with the old 300 setting up a colony, agreeing to follow the Mexican rules, the Mexican laws, speak Spanish, convert to Catholicism, no slavery. Quickly, things spiral out of control, and there's this conflict between the Tejanos, who are upset with the new Texan settlers because they're not respecting their culture, they're bringing in slavery, they're not speaking the language, and the Texans, who are upset because they don't want to speak the culture, or speak the language, they don't want to respect the culture, they don't want to become Catholic, and they want slavery. Ultimately, it leads to a Texas Revolution, where Texas declares war, essentially declares themselves free from Mexico. They win this. Remember the Alamo. Texas is the Lone Star Republic from 1835 to 1845, when the United States annexes Texas, takes it into the United States, which is ultimately going to set up a showdown between Mexico because of this border dispute. At this point, I'll let you click back in, and you can check out any of the other videos. You can feel free to watch the Louisiana Purchase, Oregon Country, Mexican Cession, Mexican-American War, California Gold Rush, the Gadsden Purchase, or Florida.